Hare Krishna devotees, welcome. Today, 17 of the Gita Sandesh program. So today we will cover chapter 17. Chapter 17, the Lord is going to come back to the three gunas and explain the life of those who do not have faith in the scriptures. How do they behave and act? Who do they worship? What kind of charity they do? All of this is explained by the Lord in chapter 17. And chapter 17 begins with a question by Arjuna. Let's go back to yesterday's chapters, which is chapter 16. So Krishna talks about divine and demoniac qualities in the first 9 shlokas. 3 shlokas are reserved to explain the divine qualities, and the rest of the chapter is really utilized by the Lord to explain various facets of demoniac qualities, how you acquire them, what kind of conduct, what triggers what, etc. So, if we can go back a few chapters, in chapter 14, the Lord talks about the 3 gunas, Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun, the 3 modes of material nature. Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. In chapter 15, the Lord talks about how the material world is actually developed based on the 3 modes, using the analogy of the upside down banyan tree. And if we were to go down, we are degrading ourselves. If we were to go up, we are elevating ourselves towards the spiritual platform. And in chapter 15, the Lord talked about 3 kinds of personalities. The Nitya Siddhas, who are in the spiritual world, they are eternally liberated. Nitya Baddhas, who are here in the material cosmos. And then himself in the form of Paramatma. Now, in chapter 16, the Lord is going to talk about the 2 types of personalities within this material cosmos, those who have godly qualities and those who have demoniac qualities. And we said in Kali Yuga, everybody has both godly and demoniac qualities. The percentage ratio of the godly and demoniac qualities may vary from person to person. And how does this manifest itself in how we approach life and how we react to situations and the kind of decisions that we make? So Krishna explains that if we develop divine qualities, then we will be elevated to higher places on that banyan tree. But if we begin to feed our demoniac qualities, then we will be degraded to lower forms of life. And in this context, Krishna talks about 26 divine qualities and 6 demoniac qualities. We'll come to that again. We'll come to the 26 divine qualities again. There is a deeper meaning behind why there are 26 divine qualities. So we look at the 6 demoniac qualities, which is pride, anger, conceit, arrogance, harshness, and ignorance. And Krishna says, divine qualities help us reach the path of liberation and helps us get liberated. Demoniac qualities sends us in the opposite direction, away from liberation. What do we need to understand by qualities? Qualities are all internal to us. Activities are external. It's based on the qualities we act. So our activities are used by others to judge how we are in real life. They they surmise what qualities we have based on the activities and actions that we take, including actions with your words and then actual actions itself. So so we have a choice on what qualities we want to nourish and what qualities we want to deprive because it's not really helpful for us. Now, what is happening here is that um, although the Lord talks about hell in this chapter, he says those who have demoniac qualities will perpetually be in hell. The Lord uses the word perpetually, but hell is not an eternal place. It's just a very tough environment and atmosphere. So, people who experience hellish conditions are just experiencing very tough situations. So, this kama, krodha, lobha, lust, anger, and greed, they are, that's why Krishna says they are gateways to hell because they really inflate your sense of yourself. They inflate your false ego quite a bit. Therefore, Krishna concludes this chapter by saying Shastra is actually the pathway to elevation. That's that uh, GPS that we were talking about, a map to get out of this this being under the control of our demoniac qualities. So, if you're a demon, or if you are a person with demoniac nature, how are you going to follow Shastra? So, Shastra may not even be in your vision, it may not even be part of your day to day life. Now, what is fascinating about our Vedic scriptures is that Shastra is not uniform. All rules don't apply to everybody. What did we just say? All rules don't apply to everybody? That doesn't seem right. So, this is how Shastras operate. If you have divine qualities, the rules for you are stricter. If you have more demoniac qualities, the rules for you are less stringent. For example, let us say we like to eat meat. The Shastra advises us against eating meat. It's not good for your consciousness. It increases the tamogun in you. But if you are in tamogun already and you have a taste for meat, how will you meet that particular requirement? By following the Shastra. Well, the Shastra says that meat has to be, or that animal has to be killed in a particular way. It has to be killed only on a specific day of the month. It has to be killed outside. The city environment, in a remote place, it has to be killed by the head of the household. Whatever is prepared from it has to be offered to Mother Kali and only then accepted. So, although Shastra tells us it's not good for us if we eat meat, at the same time, the Shastra also tells us if you do want to eat meat, how you should go about doing it. So that means Shastra does not have uniform rules for all of us. Shastra has rules for you based on your elevation of your consciousness, based on the level of your purity. Therefore, if you are more sattvic in nature, the rules in Shastra are much stricter for you. And therefore, if you violate the rules, the consequences are more severe. Now you may say, well, why should I try at all? Why can't I just be in Tamogun and do whatever I want? Because the Shastras allow me to get away with it. No, it doesn't allow you to get away with it. The consequences may be less severe, but that doesn't mean you get a better chance at liberation. Unless, through the mercy of Guru and Krishna, you come across an exalted personality who can completely transform your life. How did Narada Muni come into Valmiki's life and completely transform his life? Narada Muni comes into Prahlad Maharaj's life. He doesn't even see Prahlad. Prahlad Maharaj's life gets transformed while he's in the womb. Narada Muni comes and transforms Dhruva Maharaj's life. Narada Muni transforms the life of Mrigari. So, unless you come in contact with an exalted personality, the chances of you marching down the path of liberation when you are deep under the influence of Tamogun, it's not very high. It doesn't look good for us. Essentially, Krishna is saying that he has constructed the Shastras in such a way that even the demons have a path out. Therefore, hell is not an eternal place. Even demons are redeemable. The scripture, our Vedic scripture, has a program for everybody. So let's just say all of us are infected. Some of us have a more severe infection than others. But for every kind of infection, the Vedic scriptures has a program to address that infection. It has a cure for that infection. So if you look at Sattvagun is considered a very mild infection. Just a little bit help you need and you can be in the Shuddha Sattva state. Rajagun is considered a severe infection. If Rajagun is considered a severe infection, then what could Tamogun be? Tamogun is considered a lethal infection. So for each kind of infection, whether it's a Sattvagun, Rajagun or Tamogun, Shastra has a cure for you. So essentially the Shastra becomes the hospital. The doctor could be your guru giving out the treatment. So this is the beauty of our scriptures, that scriptures expect more of you if you are more pious. Therefore, the consequences are more severe if you violate the rules, because you've already graduated to a certain level. And therefore, to maintain that level, you have to be a little bit more stringent with yourself. That's what the scriptures expect. So, we'll talk about some pastimes related specifically to the divine qualities, that the Lord talks about. So let's look at the divine qualities in a little bit more detail. So let's come back to the chapter. So, as we said, there are 26 divine qualities that the Lord is talking about here. Then he talks about the demoniac qualities in Shloka 4. And now we're going to discover exactly why is the Lord talking about so many divine qualities. So we said there are three ways in which we acquire qualities, and I will use slightly different terminology today than what you saw on the slide yesterday. We can just say nature, nurture, and culture. Three ways we acquire any qualities. Nature means whatever you're born with, whatever you're carrying forward from previous lives. Nurture means what you practice, what you cultivate, whether it's the divine quality or the demoniac quality, both. So, nature followed by nurture. Nurture means what are you feeding? What qualities, what guna is being fed every day? And then culture. Culture means who do you associate with? And we said the single word summary for the 16th chapter is inmates. Krishna is saying, be careful who you hang out with because your sentence in this prison could increase if you hang out with the wrong people. What does that mean? Your sentence will increase? You may force yourself into more and more births way into the future if you spend time with the wrong set of people. Therefore, you have to be careful who you associate. Yes, this is a prison house, but we all are coming with different levels of infections. So if you are less infected, but you choose to spend time with a lot of people who are severely infected or lethally infected, then pretty soon you're going to be falling into that category. Therefore, nature is something that you cannot control because it's what you're born with. Nurture and culture are two things that you can control. What do you cultivate and who do you associate with? So, essentially, Krishna is saying here if you have a choice, you should associate with people who have these divine, godly qualities because they will uplift you to that same level. If you have a choice, avoid people with those 6 demoniac qualities: pride, arrogance, conceit, anger, harshness, and ignorance. So, when Lord Ram and Mother Sita, along with Lakshman, were in exile for 14 years in Dandakaranya forest, Mother Sita would often remove the thorns from the lotus feet of Lord Ram. And one day she asks Lord Ram a question. We are in exile. You have given up your kingdom. Why are you still attached to your bow and arrow? Because we are in the forests. Who are you ruling over? Who do you expect to defeat? So why are you carrying your bow and arrow around? She also tells him, I haven't seen you use it. So why are you still carrying it around? That was the question. And Lord Ram responds that I am a Kshatriya. That's my nature, and my nature will travel with me. Of course, he also says it's my duty to protect even the inhabitants of the forests, because they are also considered to be citizens of the kingdom. Of course, it's his duty to defeat the demoniac as well. When she hears this response, Sita Devi tells Lord Ram a story. And the story goes as follows. Many, many years ago, there was a very, very pious Brahmana who had enough pious credits to displace Indra from his throne, which means he could take on the position of Indra next. Therefore, King Indra felt very threatened. So Indra decides, I will come and take care of this matter myself. So Indra personally comes, of course in disguise, and he tells the Brahmana, I have this beautiful sword with me. Can I leave it with you for a few days? I'm going to be traveling. I'll come back and pick it up from you. So Indra leaves a beautiful sword with this Brahmana, with this pious person, and he waits to see what will happen. So what does the Brahmana do? The sword is in his little hut. He takes a look at it. He doesn't touch it. He just admires it from a distance. It's so shiny. It's so beautiful. A few days later, the Brahmana decides, let me pick up the sword. Let me see what it feels like. So first few days, he was just admiring the sword from a distance. He got distracted by the sword. Within a few days, he was holding the sword in his hands, admiring it. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth day, a few days pass by, and he begins to practice moves with the sword. So within a few days, the Brahmana becomes very attached to the sword and slowly loses his Brahmanical qualities. So we can say Indra was very successful, dethroning the Brahmana without him even being aware of it, just by handing him something very beautiful, shiny, attractive. So much so the Brahmana forgets who he is. This is Sita Devi telling Lord Ram that a Brahmana need not stay a Brahmana if he succumbs to temptation. So the sword is an instrument of passion, and therefore Indra's mission was quite successful. Now, after the war is finished and Lord Ram has killed Ravana, he sends Hanumanji to bring Sita. At that time, Hanuman goes to the Ashoka Vatika and he looks at all of the Rakshashis there who had been tormenting Sita Devi for so long. So he asks Mother Sita, do I have your permission to thrash them for torturing you? And in response, Sita Devi tells Hanumanji a story and essentially tells him, you have to hold on to your compassion, irregardless of how these Rakshashis may have conducted themselves. Just because they behave like Rakshashis, it shouldn't put us in a situation where we lower our values and become like them. And so Sita Devi tells the following story to Hanumanji. So one day, a hunter goes hunting for a tiger, and he had weapons in his hand. So somehow or the other, that tiger sensed him and begins to chase the hunter. The hunter falls down, he loses his weapons, and he had no choice but to quickly climb up a tree. On the tree was a bear sleeping. So the hunter had climbed up the tree, the tiger is circling the tree, the bear is sleeping on the branch. And this hunter is wondering, what can I do? Wild animals circling below, wild animal on the tree. So the tiger looks at the bear and tells the bear, we are both wild animals. This hunter is an intruder. He doesn't belong here in this forest. Why don't you push him down? I am hungry. I will eat him and I will leave some behind for you also. So both of our stomachs will be fed. Why don't you just push the man down? So the bear responds to the tiger. The minute this man climbed this tree, he took my shelter. He is my guest. I cannot harm him. And saying that, the bear does not do anything. Then the tiger speaks to the hunter, and the tiger says, look, I am hungry. Why don't you push the bear down? I will have my fill and you'll go free. And the hunter responds to the tiger immediately, and he manages to push the bear off the branch. But luckily for the bear, it falls down another branch lower in the tree and therefore doesn't fall onto the forest floor. And so the tiger tells the bear, see, I told you, you can't trust this man. He double crossed you. Although you gave him the position of a guest of honor and you protected him, he was only too happy to put you in harm's way, even though you had given him shelter. And so the bear responds to the tiger by saying, the hunter showed his nature. That does not mean I need to change my nature. So, why are we talking about all these pastimes? It's in relation to divine qualities and demoniac qualities. So sometimes we may come in association with people who have very different value systems and qualities than us. If they have better value systems and qualities, that's great. We can be inspired. If they don't, then we have to be very careful. And that's the story behind all these pastimes. Now, coming to these 26 qualities. Actually, these 26 qualities are divided by Varna and Ashrama. So some of these qualities are relating to the sannyasi, some to the grahastha, um, some to a vanaprastha, and some to a brahmachari. Similarly, some of these qualities that the Lord is talking about relates to a Brahmana, some to a Kshatriya, some to a Vaishya, and some to a Shudra. So the Lord has covered four Varnas and four Ashramas by talking about all these qualities. Which means, remember we said a Brahmana is predominantly under the mode of goodness, Sattvagun. A Kshatriya is predominantly under the mode of passion. A Vaishya is a combination of passion and ignorance. And a Shudra is under the mode of ignorance. So let's just look at some of the qualities against the four Varnas and against the four Ashrams. So a sannyasi is supposed to be fearless, is supposed to live a pure existence. He's supposed to cultivate spiritual knowledge. A grahastha should engage in charity, should engage in self control, and should also perform sacrifices. A brahmachari is supposed to study the Vedas, swadhyaya, and is supposed to lead an austere life. A vanaprastha is also supposed to practice austerity. So all these qualities are predominant based on the kind of ashrama that a person is in, which is brahmachari ashram, grahastha ashram, vanaprastha ashram, and sannyasi. So similarly, a brahmana, now we come to the four varnas. A brahmana is supposed to lead a very simple life and a non-violent life, adhering to the truth at all times. So similarly, you have the Kshatriyas. Let's look at this. The Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras. So, for example, the Shudras have to have the quality of freedom from envy and from the passion for honor. Because the Shudras are considered to be the lowest in class, they are there primarily to serve others, the other three Varnas. Therefore, they should not keep thinking, oh, I'm a lowly person, they are better off than me. They are so honored. I wish even I could have that kind of respect and honor one day. So a Shudra has to be free from envy and free from a desire to be honored, considering that he or she is in the lowest class. Lowest class means in terms of consciousness. That doesn't mean they are less of a human being. Yeah. So like this, Krishna has covered the four varnas and the four ashramas in these first three shlokas when he lists out the 26 divine qualities. So remember, these are divine qualities. So for a Shudra to be free from envy and free from a passion for honor is also a very divine quality. So Krishna has talked about charity. Charity is supposed to be the realm of Grihasthas as well as the Kshatriyas. A king is also supposed to give in charity, specifically to the Brahmanas and the poor. So one day, a king was giving charity. And the specific quality we're going to talk about is fault finding, which Krishna talks about the aversion to fault finding, which we all have a tendency to engage in. all the time. Sometimes we are just thinking it, sometimes we are verbalizing it. We are always finding fault with others. So one day a king was giving charity, food, he was serving the brahmanas, and an eagle happened to fly overhead with a snake in its mouth, a dead snake. So there was like this large pot of prasadam that was being served. As the eagle flew over that pot, a little bit of that poison from the snake fell into the prasadam. The prasadam got contaminated. It was served to a brahmana, and the brahmana, consuming this poison, died. So the king was, of course, deeply distressed. He consults his uh, ministers. He has committed the most egregious sin of killing a brahmana. Shastras say that there is no worse sin that a person can commit than killing a brahmana, killing a cow, killing a woman, killing an elderly person, or killing a child. These are considered to be death penalties, instant death penalty. So, what had the king done? He had killed a brahmana unintentionally. So, he had committed this dosha, Brahmahatya dosha, the sin of killing a brahmana. So, meanwhile, in Yamalok, Chitragupta is keeping track what is happening. So, he is a little bit puzzled. He looks at all of the activities and he's thinking, okay, who should pay the price for this killing of the brahmana? Should it be the eagle? Well, definitely it can't be the eagle. It's just doing something that's natural to it. It's carrying its food in its mouth. Well, should it be the snake? Well, it can't be the snake because the snake is already dead. Should it be the king? Well, it can't be the king because he didn't intend to kill the brahmana. It was an accident. So Chitragupta puts it in a work in progress file. He has not made a decision who should suffer the consequences of killing this Brahmana. So he waited, and pretty soon he had the answer. So one day, a few men were coming into this kingdom, and they asked an elderly lady, "Can you show us the way to the palace?" And the elderly lady said, "Oh, you mean that palace of that king who killed that Brahmana? Sure, this way." So the elderly lady receives the karma of killing that Brahmana, even though she had nothing to do with it. Why? Without knowing what had really happened, she had faulted the king for the death of the Brahmana, and worse, she had spread that news. So Chitragupta decides, I found the person who's going to suffer the consequences of killing the Brahmana. We don't know how karma works. That doesn't mean we should live in fear, but to point the fact that fault finding is a dangerous activity. We should avoid this, especially when we hear some news from somebody and we just believe them 100% and spread that news even more. We should avoid it. So, the benefit of the doubt as to who should be responsible for that crime of killing that Brahmana went to that old lady. So we cannot claim ignorance of the laws of the land because karma has different punishments also based on your varna and your ashrama. So let's look at another example. There was, in the Mahabharata, there is a story where there is an instance of a Brahmana being killed, and four people were involved in that killing, each of them from a different Varna. So Vidura decides to test the two crown princes, Duryodhana and Yudhishthira. So he calls Duryodhana first and he says, solve this case. Who should be punished for the killing of the Brahmana? So Duryodhana asks all of them, are you all responsible for this Brahmana's death? And they all say yes. And Duryodhana says, oh, then, in that case, all four of you have to be put to death. Then Vidura turns to Yudhishthira and asks him, what is your solution to this problem? So Yudhishthira asks each one of them, what's your Varna? So the first person says, I am a Shudra. And Yudhishthira says, you can go free because you are just the servant, you are following instructions. You can't be blamed. The next person says, I'm a Vaishya. So the Vaishya is jailed, whipped, and fined, but no death penalty. And the Brahmana, who was also involved in the killing of the other Brahmana, gets the most severe punishment. And Yudhishthira tells him, because you are the head of society, the Brahmanas are considered to be the intellectual class. Therefore, they help the king from a governance standpoint and they also show the path of morality. So Yudhishthira tells him, being the head of society, you should have known better. You should know that you are not this body. You acted indiscriminately, and because of that, you get the most severe punishment, which is the death punishment. So if you do karma without your knowledge, without the reaction is less. But if you should have known better because you're more educated or you are under the influence of the sattva gun, then the reactions are more severe. So that's why we were saying earlier, the Shastras have a cure for all kinds of infections. And therefore, if you are less infected and you violate the laws of nature, the punishment for you is far more severe. So that means if you have acquired some of these divine qualities and you choose to violate the laws of the Lord, the consequences for you are far more severe. So, how do we develop this power of discrimination as to what is right and what is wrong? Because not every situation gives you a clear idea of what to do. So, the power of discrimination is actually developed by studying the scriptures. So, the more we study the scriptures, the more we hear from the lips of pure Vaishnavas, you will develop the power of discrimination. Of course, chanting helps you as well in this process because you are cleansing your consciousness. So we have to be very, very careful in, first of all, understanding what is our own nature, and then also deciding what qualities we want to cultivate, continue to cultivate, and what qualities we should divest of because it's not helpful for us. So that brings us to chapter 17. So actually, chapter 16 ends with the Lord telling you how to get rid of these demoniac qualities. So 21 to 24, Krishna talks about the three gates of hell and how we should give all of these three up. because if you don't give it up, it simply degrades the soul. So the three gates to hell are lust, anger, and greed. So Krishna says those who have given this up, they they are receptive to self-realization, and gradually they'll come to the supreme destination. But Krishna also issues a warning. He says, he who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to his own whims attains neither perfection nor happiness nor the supreme destination. So Krishna is saying, if you violate the scriptures, then whatever you do is simply a waste of time. It is based on this particular shloka and the next shloka that Arjuna asks a question in the next chapter. So the next chapter begins with a question. So Krishna says one should therefore understand what is duty and what is not duty by the regulations of the scriptures. Knowing such rules and regulations, one should act so he may be gradually elevated. Which brings us to the 17th chapter. So before we begin, this chapter is called Shraddhatraya Vibhaga Yogaha. Shraddha means faith. Krishna comes back to the topic of faith, but faith comes in different flavors. And Krishna is going to walk us through faith under the influence of Sattvagun, under the influence of Rajagun, under the influence of Tamagun, especially for those who may not have faith in the scriptures. So before we begin, let's offer our most humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The acronym for today is FACE. We're going to begin with questions from Arjuna. Krishna is going to talk about faith under the influence of the three modes, austerities under the influence of the three modes, charity under the influence of the three gunas, and then how ultimately he is the enjoyer of everything. And if you don't understand Krishna's position, then whatever faith, whatever austerities, whatever charity you're practicing, Krishna concludes this chapter by saying it's simply a waste of time. But let's see. So how does this chapter begin? Arjuna uvacha ye shastra vidhim utsrijya yajante shraddhayanvitaah tesham nishtha tu ka Krishna sattvam aho rajastamah. So the first question Arjuna is asking is, O Krishna, what is the situation of those who do not follow the principles of scripture but worship according to their own imagination? Are they in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance? So Arjuna is asking Krishna a question. Not everybody knows what is in the Vedic scriptures. What if people just make up their own rules and regulations and decide this is the way I'm going to worship, this is the austerity I'm going to keep, this is the sacrifice I'm going to make, without even finding out, are these things authorized in the scriptures or not? Are they accepted by the Lord or not? What if you do some things based on your own desire and imagination? So Arjuna is curious. Such people, are they worshipping in the mode of goodness, in the passion, or in ignorance? What is their situation? Because you have explained to me these three gunas and how people act under these three gunas. You also told me some people follow the scriptures and some people don't follow the scriptures. But what if they don't follow the scriptures but they are doing their best to do some prayer, something, some ritual? What about the faith of such people? That's Arjuna's question. And what is Krishna's response? If one does not follow the Vedas, one will follow the natural instincts, which will be in goodness, passion, or ignorance. So Krishna says, whatever you construct out of your own imagination is going to be influenced by the three gunas. Because you really don't have knowledge about the Shastra to decide what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. That means you will concoct and create rules for yourself based on which guna is actually influencing you. So we know who these three brothers are. One is in Sattvagun, one is in Rajagun, and the other one is in Tamagun. So Vibhishan, Ravan, and Kumbhakaran. So from here, Krishna very methodically talks about the three gunas and the Shuddha Sattva state and the lifestyles of people in these three gunas as well as those in the Shuddha Sattva state. So Krishna is going to talk about the faith, the worship, the kind of food, the kind of sacrifice, the kind of conduct, the way people speak, and whether they are able to control their mind or not based on these three gunas. यजन्ते सात्विका देवान् यक्षरक्षांसि राजसाः प्रेतान् भूतगणांश्चान्ये यजन्ते तामसा जनाः. So Krishna is going to talk about faith and worship influenced by the three gunas. Krishna is saying men in the mode of goodness worship the demigods. Those in the mode of passion worship the demons. And those in the mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. What about the food? Krishna says those who are under the influence of Sattvagun, what kind of foods they tend to consume? Things that are wholesome, juicy, fatty, pleasing. Things that give you a long life. They purify not just your body, but also your consciousness. It gives you such kinds of food, give you strength. It keeps you disease free, Krishna says, and it keeps you happy. What about those who are under the influence of Rajagun? What kind of foods do they eat? Krishna says they are attracted to bitter or sour foods, hot and pungent foods, things that are burning, spicy. And then Krishna says if you consume such foods, you are under the influence of Rajagun and it will result in distress, misery, and disease. What about foods under the Tamagun? Krishna says such food are tasteless, they are decomposed, they are untouchable things. In modern day life, we have a tendency to keep things in the refrigerator, reheat, and eat it. Within a few hours of the food being cooked, it begins to decompose. So, foods must be freshly cooked and eaten within a few hours of it being cooked. Otherwise, the food has started to decompose. There's a wonderful example that I actually heard Sadhguru give about this. So he says you take a fruit, a fresh fruit, leave it on the counter. You take some cooked sambar, leave it on the counter. Which one will rot first? The sambar, the dal that has been cooked, will rot first compared to that fresh fruit. So cooked foods decompose faster. So the longer that cooked food has been around, there is no nutrition in it. And definitely Krishna says it's tasteless. Untouchable things are things that we're not supposed to have, like alcohol, meat, and other things. And Krishna says if you eat foods in this category, then what is the result? You will have diseases, Krishna says. You will face infections, and it will take away years from your life. It will condemn you, Krishna says, to early death. So, what's the best food then? The best food is prasadam. It has to be offered to the Lord and only then accepted. Yeah, you see a beautiful plate here of prasadam with nice tulsi leaves in it. So you after you offer bhoga to the Lord and then you consume it, then that food is considered to be Shuddha Sattva state. It cannot impact you negatively. Sacrifices in the three modes. Okay, so what about yajna? Krishna says, Vidhihinam asrishtanam mantrahinam adakshinam Shraddha virahitam yajnam tamasam parichakshate. Krishna says any sacrifice performed without regard for the directions of scripture, without distribution of prasadam, without chanting of Vedic hymns and remuneration to the priests, and without faith is considered to be in the mode of ignorance. So anybody who's performing yajna and does not distribute prasadam, Krishna says you are doing that yajna in the mode of ignorance. And any yajna without the proper chanting of Vedic hymns, that too by uh, bona fide priests, um, such yajnas are of no use. What about sacrifices in the three modes? Krishna says sacrifices in the mode of goodness is done as per the scripture. It is also done as a matter of duty, and it is done because you are not looking for a reward in exchange for making that sacrifice. So, anybody who's following the scripture and observing sacrifices and doing so as a matter of duty without expectation of anything in return are doing sacrifices in the mode of goodness. Whereas those who are performing sacrifices because they want something in return or for the sake of honor or pride, Krishna says such people are performing sacrifices under the influence of Rajogun. If it is done without the direction of scriptures, without the distribution of prasadam, without the chanting of Vedic hymns, without giving dakshina for the pujaris, and overall without having any faith, then such sacrifices are in the mode of ignorance. What about your conduct? Krishna says those under the influence of sattvagun, they worship as a matter of duty. They respect the scriptures. While they may be concocting things on their own, those under the mode of Rajagun, all of the sacrifices that they perform is with the expectation of getting something in return. So they are doing it also for self glorification. They want the recognition, the glory, and whereas those who are performing sacrifices, they are undertaking self torture to get the power to destroy others. I'm sure we can think of personalities like Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu who went through severe austerities to get power. What about speech? Well, in the mode of goodness, Krishna says our speech tends to be truthful, pleasing, and beneficial. All three have to go together. It's not one or the other two, all three combined. Whatever we speak should be spoken in such a way that even if we are speaking the truth, it should be pleasing, and more importantly, what we are about to say is beneficial for the other person. Krishna says speech in the mode of passion, it's manipulative, it's gossip, it's essentially to feel a self of self importance and perhaps be recognized and honored for knowing secrets. Speech in the mode of ignorance, Krishna says such people engage in lying, their speech agitates others, and their speech harms others. So, This is speech under the influence of the three gunas. What about the mind? What is the situation of the mind under the three gunas? Krishna says those under the influence of sattva guna, they tend to be satisfied and content. Those under rajagun, they tend to be dissatisfied and anxious. Those in the mode of ignorance, they are always bewildered and under illusion. So, because the mind is a factory for all kinds of thoughts, with like 80,000 thoughts being produced in the mind for an average person in a day, without of us even being aware of it. The best way to reduce this noisy factory called your mind is to fill your mind with reading scriptures, with hearing the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Then that factory will be like a quiet factory. It'll be a good place to live in because our mind troubles us most. What about charity? Krishna says those under the influence of Sattvagun will give charity regularly out of a sense of duty with no expectations. They will do the charity in a proper place, in a proper time, and to a worthy person. So when you're giving charity, all of this has to be met if you're doing charity in the Sattva. If you're doing charity in Rajogun, then you're doing charity hoping to be recognized. You're doing charity for the purposes of enjoying yourself, and sometimes even doing charity very grudgingly. You don't want to do it, but you do it because you know you'll get something out. Charity in the mode of ignorance, Krishna says it's done at an impure place, at an improper time, and to an unworthy person. So, even charity, you have to be careful what cause you are going to support because not all causes are the same. So, we have to be careful where our charity goes to. दातव्यम् इति यद्दानं दीयते नुपकारिणे देशे काले च पात्रे च तद्दानं सात्विकं स्मृतम्. Charity given out of duty without expectation of return at the proper time and place and to a worthy person is considered to be in the mode of goodness. And what's the best charity? If you want to do charity on the Shuddha Sattva state, what kind of charity you should be doing? You should only be charity that helps the Jivatma connect back directly to Krishna. Which means your charity is the best charity when it is used to propagate Krishna consciousness. So, Srila Prabhupada writes in the Srimad Bhagavatam that the Lord is the bestower of all benediction. If someone gives something to the Lord, he is not the loser. He is the gainer by a million times. So the best charity is to offer it to Krishna and in Krishna's service for the other Vaishnavas who will use that charity appropriately. So this particular chapter concludes with this verse and a couple of more verses also. So Krishna says, Ashraddhaya hutam dattam tapastaptam kritam chayat asad ityuchate partha nachatat pretya no iha. Krishna is concluding by saying, anything done as sacrifice, charity, or penance without faith in the Supreme, O son of Pritha, is impermanent. It is called asat and is useless both in this life and the next. So remember, the chapter began with Arjuna asking a question. What about those who don't have faith, but they still try to follow some process based on these three gunas? What are they under the influence of? So Krishna is concluding by saying, if these three kinds of people who are under the influence of these three gunas, if they don't have any faith in me, then whatever thing that they're doing, whether it's a sacrifice or a charity or a penance, Krishna says it is called asat. Asat means it's not eternal. And therefore it is useless both in this life and the next. So let's talk about Shuddha Sattva state, because that's what we are interested in. Because Krishna's instruction to us is that we should transcend the three gunas and come to the stage of pure goodness. So this is a shloka from Canto 4, Chapter 3, shloka number 23. Sattvam vishuddham vasudeva shabditam yadiyate tatra pumana pavritah sattve cha tasmin bhagavan vasudevo hyadokshajo me namasa vidhiyate. I am always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness, in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Vasudeva, is revealed without any covering. So, anybody who's practicing pure Krishna consciousness, they are in the Vishuddha Sattva state. Let's go back to chapter 14. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So going back to the 26th shloka of the 14th chapter, Krishna is telling Arjuna, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahma. So Krishna is saying, engage yourself completely, full devotional service, and don't stop, unfailing in all circumstances. If you do this, at once Krishna says you have transcended the three modes and you've already come to the level of Brahman, self realization, God realization. So, what is the Shuddha Sattva state? As soon as one is fully Krishna conscious, it is to be understood that one is in his pure, original, constitutional position. This state of existence is called Shuddha Sattva, which means that it is transcendental to the material qualities. So, this is a wonderful chapter. It's very easy to read. You can see Krishna's talking about foods 8, 9, and 10. You can see what Krishna is saying here about food prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten, food that is tasteless, decomposed, and putrid, and foods consisting of remnants and untouchable things is dear to those in the mode of darkness. So you can read these shlokas. So everything that we covered in the slide is all here. So 3 shlokas on charity, 3 shlokas on penances, 3 shlokas on food, as per the 3 gunas. Krishna talks about Om Tat Sat here. From the beginning of creation, the 3 words Om Tat Sat were used to indicate the supreme absolute truth. These 3 symbolic representations were used by Brahmanas while chanting the hymns of the Vedas and during sacrifices for the satisfaction of the Supreme. Om Tat Sat means you're invoking the Supreme Lord when you're performing your sacrifices. So Krishna says, therefore, transcendentalists undertaking performances of sacrifice, charity, and penance in accordance with scriptural regulations begin always with Om to attain the Supreme. So, after talking about those with no faith, Krishna is again coming back to those who have faith, worship Him, and still perform their sacrifices, penances, and austerities. Without desiring future results, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance, and charity with the word Tat. So, the purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. When you're performing any kind of sacrifice, penance, and charity, and you use the word Tat, you're acknowledging that nothing belongs to you. When you use the word Om, you're telling the Lord, I'm doing everything for you. The absolute truth is the objective of devotional sacrifice. So there's a difference between sacrifice and devotional sacrifice. In devotional sacrifice, your objective is to achieve Krishna consciousness, pure Krishna consciousness. The absolute truth is the objective of devotional sacrifice, and it is indicated by the word Sat. Sat means eternal. The performer of such sacrifice is also called Sat, as are all works of sacrifice, penance, and charity, which, true to the absolute nature, are performed to please the Supreme Person, O son of Vritha. And the last shloka. Anything done as a sacrifice, charity, or penance, without faith in the Supreme, O son of Vritha, is impermanent. It is called asat and is useless both in this life and the next. So, coming to the single word summary of our 17th chapter, which is the divisions of faith, Shraddhatraya Vibhaga. Shraddha, as per the three different faiths. So, Krishna is saying the key to going back to the spiritual world is one must first have faith. Without faith, you cannot accomplish anything. So one must have faith in Krishna. One must have faith in Om Tat Sat. Om Tat Sat means the supreme absolute truth, the supreme Lord, Sri Krishna. So with that, we conclude the 17th chapter today, and we'll pick up the 18th chapter on Sunday.